guys. Now we have the great pleasure and honor to welcome a gentleman here in Vienna who has been at the forefront of innovation at Amazon Alexa, one of the most talked about products of recent years. But he's also a serial entrepreneur and has built companies like Go Butler, Helpling, or Zipjet from the ground up.
Yes, Johannes, for his numerous achievements. This gentleman was also selected by the prestigious Forbes 30 Under 30 list and has been consulted by numerous institutions all around the world. He made the long trip from Los Angeles to Vienna to be here with us today. And he will have a talk now about the power of voice with the lovely Anita Zielina. So, ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm welcome to Navid Hadzaad, Java Hirian, and Anita Zielina.
1, 2, 3, 4.
So, hello again. Thanks for being here.
Of course, thanks for having me.
And actually spending some of your free time with us, because you actually left Amazon a while ago and are here now basically as you yourself, not a representative of Amazon, which makes me excited for the conversation because I think we can maybe get a bit of a broader insight into the topic that we discussed about and into voice interfaces and service design in voice. And one thing that I wanted to kind of kick the conversation off with is the impression that I have is that there is often this hype-like feeling around disruptive technologies. And I sometimes feel that, that voice interfaces, while some companies might know what they're doing, some just basically decide to be in the interface game or in the voice game because that's what you have to do now. Is that am I completely wrong? Is there a hype?
So first of all, thanks again for having me. There's definitely worse places to travel to than Vienna. So, I think it's a very, very legit and fair question, especially, I think we've, over the last few years seen some products that have kind of emerged, like chatbots, for example, in the conversational space where, folks have kind of been questioning the real utility and value for customers and brands that are building them. So, I think, it's always a balance, right? I think on the one hand, the way that voice assistants and smart speakers emerged was really based on a new technology. So, being able to actually detect, a wake word like Alexa or Google Home from 10, 15, 20 feet away very, very accurately was something that hadn't really been there before. And that allowed customers to have a very magical experience by saying something like, Alexa, play this, and it would actually work even if you were around the corner or in another room. And but at the same time, I think there is definitely a lot of hot air around certain parts of the technology and voice assistants. I think there's a lot of brands don't really know, okay, like what am I supposed to offer customers through that interface, right? And you see folks investing and launching applications on these interfaces, and then okay, like why is nobody ordering a pizza through the smart speaker? And I think I think the thing really to think about there is the same way I think a lot of these large companies develop these products, being very, very focused on the customer and really working backwards on, okay, what is the foundational utility that we're really delivering, and like how is this different and offering a customer a better or faster or more convenient experience than something else that currently exists. I think that brands or everybody who's developing for the platform should embrace that and think about it the same way.
That's a great point, and diving deeper into that, if you think about conversational AI, where in general do you see that potential for value creation? Because some of the things you mentioned, I think we agree that just basically copy-pasting an existing app or an existing interface into conversational AI is not per se value-creating. Mm-hmm. What parts of services and what parts of deliverables do you see as value-creating, and where do you see the most exciting conversations in the industry?
Yeah, so I mean, hard to know. I think if I knew that would be great. But I think maybe just take a step back and think about, okay, because many people try to compare this with the evolution of an app store and apps on, on the iPhone and on Google Play. And I think the main difference is that you're really trying to render content in a different way. So you're not just taking web content and rendering it in a more native environment like an app, but you're really fundamentally limiting the amount of content that you can give to the customer, right? So I'll give you an example. Let's say I want to order a ride through my Alexa device or through my Google Home device. And there's many pieces of information that you kind of want to see, like how far is it, like the different categories, like Uber X, Black, how far are they, what are the different price points, and it's really difficult to, via voice only, to render all that information to the customer without being very annoying, right? So I see voice as a great complementary interface to access certain things for the customer and like certain key pieces of information, right? So I think what would be useful if I'm ordering a ride through my app and my device is giving me notification a minute or two before it's there or when it's outside my house. I think that's is an experience that makes sense. Yeah. And generally, I think we're still really, really early. I think we're still very, very far away from that universal AI, the conversational AI that can have back and forth conversations and keep context and all those things. But I think again, I think focusing on really the utility and really this makes sense to do via voice. And I think most people today who are using smart speakers are using them for things like listening to music, right, or setting alarms and timers. And I think if you think about it, compared to me picking up my phone and saying, hey, I want to listen to this and that, and versus just saying, hey, play this, that is a magical experience, which is actually more efficient for me, right? So I think thinking about that first will kind of naturally, bring top of mind experiences that will make sense.
So do you think we kind of, to that point that you made, do you think there is still a certain time when we'll be in an age of, let's say, just basic services through conversational AI? Will there be like a leap towards real, unique, from scratch value creation through conversational AI? I know you can't predict, but what do you think? Or is it, or maybe might we just end up with basically a set of services that's pretty basic, but really makes our lives easier?
I think that's where we are now, right? Yeah. I think that you have certain use cases which predominantly, define the usage and the engagement of these devices, right? And I think experimentation and just, and product creation will lead to more and more services. But I think, in the long term, hopefully, many of these things will be accessible through voice in a way that makes sense. And again, I personally view voice as a complementary interface to a graphical user interface, right? I think you should not just limit yourself to have to design the entire customer experience in voice, right? There's just too many areas where it makes sense to actually give a customer a visual interface to complement that, right? And I think the creation of more screen-enabled devices will help with that as well.
One thing that I see happening in legacy companies, whether they're in media or in digital or in consumer goods, trying to include conversational AI in their value chain or create products and services around it, is I see that they struggle to do user testing, and they struggle because they got used to, after, late, but they got used to doing user tested for desktop. Then they finally, 1 or 2 years ago, understood the need to do user testing for mobile and for apps, and that was already kind of a huge leap. And now it's like, wow, how do we actually find out what a user needs and what emotions he connects with a service and how we actually fulfill his needs with sound or with voice? What do you have to?
Well, I think that goes back to just what's the process of creating a product, right? Ideally, you always start from your customer and really work backwards from that. And it's definitely, I think it hasn't become as common to do that for voice, for sure. And people, as you said initially, I think oftentimes are trying to take the core capability of their product or service and just, try to translate that into a voice experience. But I think, I can only recommend to anyone who is thinking about doing things in voice to think about, okay, how are customers using my product today? And, how could a voice-enabled skill or app help them? And I think that's really the only way, I think, to have something that's successful in that ecosystem, right?
but you see that happening a lot, like the user testing in voice. Is that something that's like, because I mean, there are endless tools for user testing, A/B testing, whatsoever, on digital platforms. Are there tools, are there institutions that really work with voice interface user testing?
There's definitely tools for model training, right?
Yeah.
So if you're trying to create a new skill and like you just need to train your NLU models, there's definitely tools that will kind of crowdsource. Just you need somebody to say, I don't know, whatever, Darwin's circle 10,000 times from 10,000 people. There are kind of tools that will help you do that. I think for straight, I would have to think, for straight user testing or A/B testing features, probably not, right? But, you can just do it. I mean, I would say you can just do it yourself. Just, get 10, 20 people in a room and have them try out different things. But, maybe somebody can start that company right now.
Yeah, that would be great. Maybe you. Like coming back to because you said starting a company, one thing, one company, like Sandra mentioned before, is Go Butler that you did. And let's chat a little bit about one of the, I think, very hyped parts of voice and conversational AI, the service or assistant part. I think in the very beginning, and that's my impression of the conversation, there was this hope/fear, whether you're on the optimistic or pessimistic side of things, that there will be a virtual assistant that basically is just as good and just as effective as a real assistant. First question, you think we are there yet? Second question, you think it's something that we should aim for?
So first of all, I think it's a hope. We're definitely not there yet, right? So I think coming back to Go Butler and the companies that had emerged around that 3-4 years ago time where it was more about like, hey, like let's introduce a human, let's bring a human into the loop and let's try to kind of make up for the lack of capability for these AIs and just bring in a human. I think that at the end of the day, the problem with that model is just it's just there's a lack of consistency, right? I mean, once you're dealing with a human, there's just everybody has a different tolerance for service, and so I think customers at scale just want a very consistent experience, especially when they're on their phones, right? And they don't want to wait. I think the lag when you're dealing with human, obviously, like it's not real time, and so I think that's what led to that kind of to fade away. But we're not there. Clearly, we don't have the fully automated assistant that can truly be on a human level. And I'd hope we're there someday. Just because the way I think about all these things, whether it's autonomous driving or something like that, that can essentially just give you back time, will just let us, as a species, focus on things that are more important, right? Than scheduling meetings or ordering food or whatever it is. So, but I really still think we're far away from being there. There are things that already work pretty well. Again, like I think listening, like giving a command to listen to a specific song today is a lot faster than it used to be when you had to do it through your phone and like connect it with an aux cable to a speaker. And I think step by step we're going to get there. That it will just make our lives easier. And I think the strategy that the major companies in this space are taking now is really just to be in as many places as you can be, right? Not just in your home, but also in your car and on your phone. And I think that will be more and more help for the customer also to just think about these things, something that's always with you rather than something that's just in your living room.
Yeah. One point that I want to pick up is you mentioned commodity. And I'd just like to challenge a little bit, not even you that much, but the general assumption that commodity necessarily is something like an endless amount of commodity is something that's good. Isn't there a danger that the complete commoditization of service, of consumption, of content consumption, of product consumption, of engagement in whatever way is also making us lazy to a certain extent, is making us uncreative to a certain extent, is making us kind of, mellow and shallow to a certain extent?
I mean, it's a very, very fair point. I think and I think it fundamentally depends on the viewpoint that you have, right? So I think, there's bigger problems that we have and that we should go after, and getting things, commoditized and just, getting essentially the price down for everything to zero, whether it's time or money, whatever it is, gives us the ability to do things that we, either enjoy more or think have a better ROI essentially on your time. But, if it's, so yeah, I mean, that's one viewpoint. And the other viewpoint is, as you said, like, oh, everybody gets lazy and nobody wants to do anything anymore because everything is right there for you for free, right? So, but again, I mean, obviously the view I have is, I think all these things are really just facilitators to give us time back so we can do things that we think are more important in our lives.
Can you think of applications or approaches where conversational AI works more on the side of content or product creation, on the side of creativity, where it enhances, let's say, human potential for creating unique things? Or is that, I know I'm asking questions that are so far in the future and maybe not in the future, but I'm sure you have something interesting to say. Or is kind of conversational AI bound to stay on the kind of receiving end of technology?
Great question, and I'm thinking. I mean, I personally haven't seen those type of products where I'd say, oh, like this is triggering somebody's creative process to do really, really, really exciting things. Again, other than, hey, like this is making something a little bit more convenient for you. I think, this might sound very boring, but I think we've seen some products, especially like in the customer service industry, where you could say, okay, this is actually helping me get something faster, right? It's not very, very creative, but I think essentially modern IVR systems, that everybody accesses when they're calling into customer service are a form of a conversational experience. And, I think it's getting better and better, when you call in somewhere and they ask you, okay, like, what are you calling about? And you're expressing that. It actually works in some instances it can work quite well.
Sometimes.
But I don't know. I haven't really seen a product where I'd say, oh my God, like that's really helping folks creating new products.
What do you see if you think about kind of the big next frontiers, both in conversational AI on the technology side of things, but also on the product delivery service side of things? Can you talk about some things that you see kind of as the next big leaps that might decide where the technology and the product world will evolve?
Yeah, for sure. I think two things, right? I think the one thing is basically progress in science and on the natural language processing, natural language generation part, which will just help us over time to be able to have more natural conversations with these devices, right? And that I think combined with just general progress in AI, which will allow for a much more personalized experience, right? So you can actually talk to a device that it knows it's you, it has your preferences, and it's having just really great conversation with you, being able to make proactive suggestions to you. I think that will kind of help on the one hand. And I think the other thing is, I mean, you mentioned it, right? Just all these brands popping up and offering new services on these devices. I think what needs to happen on that part is what we touched on early in the conversation, is more of a focus on, okay, like what's the real problem that we want to solve for the customer here? And I think that will naturally happen over time because like everybody believes in voice, right? I think some brands are kind of like, oh, like why, like we have this application out there in the ecosystem, but folks aren't really engaging with it. And I think that will lead to a natural progress of pivoting and trying out different things and eventually landing on the right thing, right? So I think those two things over time will expand the set of use cases that customers use it for, right? I mean, you have to say there's tens of millions of customers already who are engaging with these devices on a very, very frequent basis, right? So it's definitely already, you could already consider it a success. I think the key thing is how do you essentially diversify the usage, and how do you make people use it for many, many different things, and make those things very sticky, right? And especially as brands, you want folks to use it on a very frequent basis. So
good point. Very last short question, because we're nearly out of time. Do you rather see conversational AI as disrupting existing business models and completely kind of creating a new track of business model opportunities, or do you see it as kind of a value enhancement for current businesses?
Again, I think it's both, right? I think for certain features and products, it's really an enhancing thing to give you a complementing experience to something that you already have. And hopefully there are definitely also products that are disrupting it by just creating something new that hasn't really been there before. So, you know, ideally, it's both.
Wonderful. It's an exciting space to be in, and we're looking forward to your next venture, whatever it will be. I'm sure it's going to be exciting. Thank you so much for being here, and
thanks so much for having me.
For the audience. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, Anita. Thank you, Navid.